Welcome to the Ways of Joy podcast. I'm your host, Brenda Winkle. I'm a mindset empowerment coach and an energy healer. This podcast is about finding joy. It will also be about inspiring people who have built joy-filled lives. You'll hear more about how to find joy through the day, the weeks, the months, and years of your life, and learn about how to spread joy. You'll also hear powerful stories that don't sound joyful at the beginning, but where joy was found. I started this podcast because I wanted to normalize finding joy in the ups and downs of daily life. I hope you feel inspired and entertained. Pop in your earbuds, take me with you on your commute, or both. Let's do this. Find waves of joy. Would you like to feel better and release limiting beliefs? Of course you would. I created a free meditation for you that's downloadable. As soon as you click submit, I'll email you with a downloadable version of this free meditation. Go to brendawinkle.com/feel better.
Hello, Cloud.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh my God. I'm so glad to see you. So a little context for anybody who's listening is Coty and I are sitting here at my dining room table. We've got Jane the Chewini hanging out with us, and we are just going to have a great time.
Yes, we are. We're manifesting great times. We predict, we believe, we create.
We're here for it.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
We're here for it. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's an honor to connect with an audience, with a group of people who enjoy your voice. And as you know, I'm in a season of being intentional about my relationships and my friendships, and all the other kind of relationships that we can have. And part of the blessing of that, the benefit of that, is when you connect with others and you have intentional relationships, then there's this almost like a stream to a river to an ocean kind of effect of the people that you meet and you speak to outside of that, you know, are also part of that extended blessing. So, hey, y'all, what's up? How you doing?
Oh my gosh. I love you so much.
I love you. Let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go.
So we met at this conference, and I took one look at you and was like, I must have you in my life.
Stop.
No, it's true. It's true.
I'm posing. You can't see it. Maybe you can see it, depending on what this is. I'm posing with gratitude like a model. No, that was meeting you at that conference was refreshing. And I was, you know, I'm always grateful to connect and network with other people. But again, like authentic friendship making, intentional conversations with people. It seems to be a rare find the older that you get, the wiser, the more experience that you have. You know, it's a little bit harder, right? Because the contract changes.
Yeah, the contract changes. And I think that there gets to be some people who decide that they're going to live authentically, and they show up in the world differently than the people who are going through their lives saying yes to things that they don't want to do, and yes in ways that don't feel authentic to them. And then they show up differently for us in those ways too.
Ouch. Right? Accurate.
Yeah.
The ouch is the first syllable in accurate. I just made that up. I was just on the phone with a friend who was playing basketball with a good friend from college. We're talking a relationship over 20 years, and that they were searching for words to talk about. And he said, I would pretend that this was new information to me, but he had noticed that energy over time. And in us talking about this hang, you know, he did a little compare and contrast my relationship with you, Coty, my relationship with insert some other people in our extended friend circle, people who were not my friends, who are my friends now because of him, as we were talking about before. And I started reflecting as he was reflecting, on statements that I've heard from mentors of, well, the older you get, your friend circles change, And that's true, but it's more than that, because my concern about that statement is that friendships change because of time, and thus there is nothing that we can control about it, and we have no actions or place in that. But what I shared with this friend in my thinking out loud was perhaps they were searching for words, because all relationships, like fruit or a tree, they expand. Branches grow at the same time as roots extend further into the ground, as leaves change with seasons. And if there's a part of your plant that is stunted, you know what I'm saying? Like if there's fruit that is rotten, the fruit is supposed to fall. Mm-hmm. Okay, if you don't know this about me, I'm a preacher. Like, I'm not actually a preacher, like I'm not ordained, but I just have this thing where, like, this is how I talk. So stay with me, okay? Stay with me.
Bring it.
That if there's a reason why plants and the garden needs pruning, plants need pruning. Yeah. I have friendships that went on extended breaks. The fruit had to fall, and one of us had to roll away from the other to become something greater than what we were in that moment, whether that was mutual or individual. But evolution still had to take place. Mm-hmm. And when people don't evolve, when things are not growing, then the distance between that broken branch and where you are as a tree, or where they are, right? Let's humble ourselves. What if we are the thing that is stunting the development of the garden, right? Mm-hmm. That's a stark reality. That's a hard apple to bite, but I'm fruit analogy, but I've been doing a lot of reflecting, and that friend's doing a lot of reflecting on what's going to happen with that relationship, with that connection. So I say all that to say, meeting people, as you were saying, meeting people authentically, and what happens when people show up in their authentic self versus when they don't, can look a lot like that, can present themselves. And we are not, at least I am not, in a season where I'm willing to roll the dice on something that might poison my garden. Okay. Back up. I can't do it. I can't do it.
I love that. Roll the dice on something that might poison your garden.
I can't. Okay. I don't know, but it's hard, Brenda. It's hard because then you throw this whole concept of having faith in people, and then what if someone was placed in your life for you to help them grow?
Well, and see, here's what I think too, is all of what you said, and we owe it to ourselves and everyone in our lives to take really good care of ourselves, and to preserve, on the garden analogy, to preserve the borders of our garden.
Yes.
So that we can stay clean and clear and healthy. And if someone's going to bring toxin into my garden, I am not here for that.
I'm not. We don't have the bandwidth for poison.
No.
It's just, we don't have it. So in December of 20, what is time but a construct? December of 2021. Just the other day, y'all. I know I've told you about when I DJ'd. Mm-hmm. I DJ'd this wedding. So I did DJing for our friends who may be listening. DJing paid for my tuition when I was in college. And I was doing a lot of, house parties and sorority and frat things. But when you stay out to 2-3 o'clock in the morning, fun fact, you fail all your 8 a.m. classes. So that wasn't something that was sustainable, right? I had to grow out of that. And so I stopped doing that, and I moved into the wedding sector. I'm doing more corporate events and cocktail parties and stuff. And it made for a really awesome experience as a budding educator, a budding choir director, who also got to flex my musicality in this way. And then I would, I thought, oh, now I'm a teacher, I'm not going to do this anymore. It conflicts with who I am. No, it's part of my brand ethos. I was actually still DJing, but now I'm DJing school events and proms and homecomings and the weddings and the corporate events. So I got to have this balance. And I had days when I would leave school on a Friday from Houston, Texas, and Texas is 12 hours away from Texas, when you think about driving. And so I would leave Houston, Texas, and then drive 3 hours to San Antonio, to San Antonio or Austin, Texas. set up, DJ, break down, get back in the car and drive to Houston and be in class on Monday.
Wow.
And then that eventually, as I got older, shifted to, okay, now I'm spending the night. Then it turned into, now I'm tired and I'm like sleeping in my car at a rest stop. And over time, I couldn't keep up with something, you know, that I had always done. So fast forward to this December, I DJ a wedding and I hop on the plane and it's in Boulder, Colorado. And what no one could predict was I was flying into a wildfire. This is 3 days before classes start at Portland State University where I teach. And I made this choice. I made this choice because, you know, I love doing it and I love the friend that I did it for. And it is not the bride nor the groom nor the wedding party's fault that there was a freaking wildfire in Boulder, Colorado on December 30th, followed by a snowstorm on December 31st. This was some apocalyptic, I can't make this, you can Google these things, right? And that was New Year's Eve. And that is not how I pictured my New Year's Eve by any means, you know, trucking along and moving sound equipment and sweating and all of this different stuff. And I found myself, here comes the kicker, y'all. I found myself praying, right? I'm a prayer. I find myself praying to God or the cosmos, or even reminding myself, right? Because what is prayer but intentional meditation? Whether it's to a deity or to yourself or for your home, for your family and your surroundings, right? So I take this time to myself and I say, God, I promise if you get me through this, I will never do this again. I am done. Because I told that bride when they hired me, you know, I believe this season is done for me. I don't think I'm supposed to be doing this anymore. And I did it anyway. I rationalized that decision in my head and found myself with the exact same consequences where I want to point blame at everybody else. But the thing to remember is nothing about DJing had changed. I changed. And as I had evolved, I kept returning to something that was a constant and will always be a constant. That's the business. That's the job. So what I was afraid to admit, because it made me have to reflect on who I was as a person, is I just no longer wanted to do the job. And that doesn't make DJing a bad person or a bad thing. That doesn't make me a bad person or a bad thing.
Right.
But the fruit had expired. See, we talk about bandwidth and people coming in with poison, but we fail to realize how we can be a toxin to ourselves. And how by sometimes maintaining those relationships, we are hurting ourselves. We are hurting each other. It's very easy for me to talk a lot of mess about that as a line of work, but that helped me teach kids.
Yeah. This is gold and a mic drop moment because, because, you know, when we are doing things that don't bring us joy, that we don't want to do, and then we turn around and blame the thing and the people and all the things, it is setting up for disappointment.
Yes.
Setting up for blaming. And the real responsibility lies within us.
Yes. Yes. 100%. And finding that responsibility or being accountable, right? Keeping ourselves accountable without the residue of doubt or the residue of guilt.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
I've been sharing with some elementary kids this past week. I worked at camp. Can't stop, won't stop. I worked at camp this past week. And one of our mottos, I told the kiddos, I said, you know, mistakes happen, right? We get so caught up and I missed this note and I missed this moment, I missed this rhythm. But then we forget that mistakes just happen. So I'm in the middle of working on a little canon with the kids. And I had a little stutter. When I'm tired, I get a little stutter. My brain's not firing at 100%. You know, my brain's not firing at 100%. And a kindergartner, a little kiddo named Bea goes, mistakes happen. And everyone, you know, they just kept going with rehearsal and I stopped everything. And I said, we need to pay attention and talk about out the mouths of babes. That I was reminded by this child who I would then remind them later on this week. It was this back and forth, right? That, you know, mistakes happen. People do things. I don't have to get mad at myself. I don't have to blow up a whole storm because I did it again.
Right.
I set myself up again for doing this thing, for being, we don't have to blame each other. It's just knowing that our time has come to an end, whether it be with that job, with that friendship, with that romantic relationship, right? With that habit. There was a point in time I loved running and then I injured my foot. then I didn't love it so much. Even after it healed, I was like, this doesn't feed me the way that it feeds me. And then after going through a tumultuous romantic relationship, I found boxing as an outlet. And now that's my cardio of choice. And every blue moon, go on a jog and stuff like that. Yeah, sure. And I don't mean to downplay the power of our conversation using the running or the boxing metaphor, but I say that to say that I can have an appreciation for running and jogging and that way of expressing the body, because it's a spiritual thing for me. When I get in that boxing gym and I hit that bag, the day starts with somebody's face every time. I walk in thinking about somebody in my life and I'm like, I want to knock you out. And every time that workout ends, it's me. Every time it ends, it's a reminder that I am working through something in which the only way I can work through it is by letting my body sweat and letting those toxins out of my body in this way, and doing it by myself or with a team or in some way. So I realize no one's against me. And anybody who even professes that they're against me, it's just they're against themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all it is.
Everything's a hologram.
A hologram.
Yeah, everything is a hologram. We're seeing what we are running in our own minds out in the physical world. So if you're seeing things you don't like, it's because you're not liking parts of you.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot to process. I've been thinking a lot about this may be a left turn, but it's what came in my mind. Consent in things at its root.
Yeah.
And building relationships and talking about trimming the tree and the gardens and, and the holograms and the reflection is, I think about a mentor who said to me when it came to classroom discipline, Coty, delayed obedience is disobedience. What you do not correct, you give permission to. And if it wasn't so wordy, I get it tattooed on my neck. You know what I'm saying? But when that is Denise Eaton. It's a dear friend of mine and a mentor. She hates that I still call her a mentor, but I said it anyway, Denise, because I'm still learning from you. And I think about that phrase, yes, in the classroom, but in the ways that we go about our relationships with other people. Delayed obedience is disobedience. What you do not correct, you give permission to. So if we're talking about the hologram, the things that we don't like about people, or we may not like in different relationships, right. and people, when we feel envy, when we feel jealousy, that it really holds up a mirror to ourselves. The amount of times I've had conversations with myself about friends this summer, when I thought, the next time they do that thing, I have to find an opportunity to correct it. I have to find an opportunity to address it. And then the reality check, this is the burden of working on yourself, is that you come to some conclusions faster and you don't like what you hear. One of the things I heard in my head is, Coty, you've been given ample opportunity to call that statement out, to call that action out. But somewhere in your mind, what you say this relationship is, you don't feel confident in it, or you have a lack of trust in it. That's exactly why you need to address it. If I want that relationship to evolve, it needs me to call it out. Right. And then I'm left with my fight language. I'm left with realizing, but your fight language is avoidance. And so you want stuff to correct itself, because I want people to just snap to my energy and my action, right?
I like that too.
I mean, you know what I'm saying?
I totally.
It's one of the reasons why we get along, you know what I'm saying? But not everyone is blessed to have this, right? To be working with a twin, with a sister in this manner, and we need, just like they taught us with the food pyramid, we need a variety in our diet. Ooh, yes. That hurt me just saying that out loud.
Well, I think what you're saying is so relatable, because in those moments where something, let's use the word chase in a relationship, just doesn't feel good, we have a choice in that moment to either say something or not say something. And if we decide to say something, then we risk confrontation, right?
That part.
And if we don't say something, then it's a little bit like drinking poison. Back to the beginning of the conversation.
Oh my goodness. and what's so funny that my first gasp came from, I'm using all these colorful mannerisms to also talk about just conflict.
Yeah.
And one of my go-to phrases is, we must lean into the dissonance.
Mhm. Oh, I like that.
I love to lean into the dissonance in music. If everything was just pretty final chord, then there was no conflict to challenge the listener.
Mhm.
And I always talk about that we have dissonance in the way that our countries, our continents were created, right? That Earth literally broke from itself and clashed into each other to make mountains.
Yeah.
And yet all of us in some way, shape, or form are avoiding addressing that one coworker about that one thing. And we still have a spouse that just keeps leaving that seat in a way that I don't want that seat to be done. And that's not how I like my dishwasher to be packed. And we just boil and boil and boil and boil and boil. Because at the root of it, there was some form of trust not established, or there's no trust there in order to evolve.
Yeah.
We are being asked as individuals to continually challenge ourselves in building trust, continuous trust,
right,
with others. And that begins with trusting ourselves.
Yes, exactly.
Double checking our intentions and saying, well, why does this upset me so much? Is this a content warning to my body? Is my body triggered in some reason? Am I going into some sort of post-traumatic? But for a lot of us, that's what it could be.
It could be.
Is that these friendships, these relationships, these work relationships or romantic relationships remind us of something that send our bodies into what is actually a preservation mode. Talk about the poison. Talk about the self-poison of the garden.
That's it right there.
That's what it is right there. So the 4 stages of PTSD are reimagining, arousal. What's the third? The third is avoidance. And I'm hearing my own common language across these things. And the last is numbing. And so when we experience any type of grief in our life, I use that word because we separate trauma from grief, but grief is a form. Like when we experience something that gives us grief, that is a reaction to a trauma, right? And people only know the pain they feel right now. So the body goes into a particular state of shock when someone dies, just like they do with a breakup.
Yeah, it's the same hormone.
It's the same hormone release, right? But we haven't normalized that conversation, and it's important for us to do that because people can only understand the pain they feel in that moment. I'm thinking of when I lost a mentor, and a mentor die the same week as I had a friend, go through a romantic breakup, and I could not understand that the weight of that within our bodies was the same, even though one of us looked at it less, than the other.
Right.
But I digress, Brenda. So in that first stage of reimagining, the hard thing about that is we don't know whether that is happening in real time,
right,
or if that's a memory.
Right. And our body doesn't know the difference.
And the second stage, which is arousal is the mother trucker that gets me every time. Because the thing about arousal is that it's the fight or flight moment of the body. What are we going to do to protect you in this moment that this thing is happening? How are we going to react? Well, the arousal protected in the trauma, in the grief, but the cycle of trauma, right? The cycle says that you always go back to arousal, and it's the thing that is stopping you from moving forward.
Right.
It's stopping you from evolving. So then we avoid it. How do we avoid it? We avoid it whether it be in silence or with work or with buying, going on a shopping spree.
Or just being busy.
Right? Whatever our form of busy is. And then we find ourselves in the numbing.
Yes.
And I learned when I first started my mental health journey, and I shared a long journal entry that I had with my therapist. And I asked, I asked several therapists, why is it that I felt my emotions as a pendulum, right? The older that I got, right, here were some things in my life that weren't changing, and I was changing. I didn't realize that. But why is it that they felt suspended, right? Like one of those physics balls, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Why did I feel suspended in grief, at spontaneity, is specifically after experience moments of euphoria.
Mm-hmm.
And when I found the right therapist for myself, or when I was building, and that therapist was helping me build habits outside of just those sessions and what I was doing to keep myself busy, what I learned was that when we are attempting to avoid without addressing those core things and having those conversations with ourselves, that because the body can't tell the difference in the hormone release,
Right.
that when we are in moments of euphoria, the body preps to address grief.
Yes.
That it says, oh, you ready for this now? You're off here working on your career, or doing these things with your children, or working in your garden, or taking the time to read a book. And it's the reason why sometimes we're sitting here reading Untamed by Glennon Doyle, and we can't get through the book
Yeah.
because every paragraph is making us have these deep conversations with ourselves.
Right.
You know, and
where we're so scared to access joy, because if we do, God forbid, how am I going to survive it when the joy leaves?
yes. Yes. So then we go to that last stage of the numbing.
The numbing.
And thus the cycle begins again and again. Some of us numb with alcohol, some of us numb with drugs, some of us numb with food, some of us numb with other people's problems.
Oh, that's a thing.
Yeah. Some of us numb by continuing to be busy. Perhaps that's not necessarily the way that we avoid. Maybe it's the way that we numb ourselves.
It's common.
It is common. And it happens again and again and again. That is how we serve.
Yes.
As our own poison.
Yeah.
And refusing to evolve and refusing to address that so we can trim that fruit.
Yep. And there's a lot of research on the addictive qualities of the stress hormones.
Oh, yeah.
So it's literally changing our body chemistry when we begin to try and get into that rest and digest state, where we're coming out of the trauma response and the trauma cycle. And so, giving ourselves time and grace, and then recognizing that this is an addiction.
Yes.
So we're creating chaos. We're creating conflict. We're creating all of these things.
I feel exposed. Is there an HR for this podcast? I would love to speak to the HR representative.
Well, this is a one-woman show at this point.
So that's it. You got what you got, baby. I respect it. But yes, that addictive quality of the stress hormone. I had a friend call me out on that myself. I feel very exposed. and the part, it's because we return to what we know.
We do. We only know what we know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And if we were made or grew up in, or our origin story is based in some form of chaos and or stress, well, really, those are one and the same.
They can be. Yeah, absolutely.
We return to it.
Yep.
For a long time, there was a particular ex-boyfriend that I would use as part of my romantic origin story. That in dating Billy, let's call him Billy, and I say that because I ain't got nobody to protect, but my story is not made in speaking someone else's name. Hello. In the dating of Billy, it was so easy for me to continue to use that story in those years that we were together, and that pain, to just say, this is why I won't return to these things, and this is why I can't do this, and this is why I won't do that. But the first hard lesson I had to get out of that was, what was my role? Now, disclaimer, I am not covering up any abuse that occurred in that situation. What I want to address is that from the very beginning, I knew that was not right for me, and that I ignored my gut from the start, and that should have been enough. And so no matter what the fine print details are, or shall I say, all the clauses and all the paragraphs and addendums to that contract, I walked into a contract and my gut told me no. So if I won't trust myself, how in the heck am I supposed to be with somebody else?
Yeah.
If I won't listen to my own compass. And everything was the aftermath of not being able to follow my true north.
Oh my God. So this was my experience too. I knew in my gut I knew it wasn't right. And so I knew that. And then I continued to make excuses around why that wasn't actually true. And then I began to make excuses around behavior that I knew was not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then I began to think, oh, I know, I'll just fix him.
Oh. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It didn't end well.
It did
And
not.
it didn't end well. And it wasn't fair to him either.
No, it really isn't. I wish metaphorical Billy all the love and thriving in the world, because I pray for all of us that we have room to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have to stick around for that. And it was never my job to do it in the first place,
Mm-hmm.
nor was it for him to fix me.
Right.
I walked in there needing my own pruning. I walked in needing to do work on myself. And we did not sign up for those clauses. So we modified and we pretend and we did covert actions and we said that we were okay with things that we were not okay with. And the weeds began to grow. And we pretended like we were looking out at the Amazon forest, but we were looking at the back of a dumpster landfill. And calling it the Japanese garden. It was not it.
Oh my gosh.
It was not
it's
it.
funny because you just kind of described my marriage.
I mean, and you know what I've said about, as a choir director, you find yourself, or most of us in certain fields of education, there's some sort of competition, but that's a whole nother podcast about how we've turned education into a competitive sport. Anyway, so here I am judging, a contest of children as soloists. And the longer you do this and the more you are in your field, as you know,
right,
as a fellow artist, you know your students' voices with your eyes closed.
Yeah.
I'm doing this contest and I have a student, Raquel, who walks in behind the screen, and I know it's Raquel's voice. I have no doubt. I knew I had at least a couple of soprano twos. I'm judging soprano two, boom. And you have this moment. A lot of people won't admit it, but I'll admit it. It all crosses our minds. You have this moment. Do I rank this student higher than they deserve to keep them in the contest? And the answer is without a doubt a no. Mm-hmm. And above all the reasons of being ethical and, and the responsibilities we have as educators, what the personal, the real moral thing that you have to realize is on the table is the minute you go against that aspect of consistency within yourself, then the rest of your scores don't matter anymore. Right. Nothing makes sense. Things don't align. You can't check your math because now you got this variable thrown in that has thrown off the whole equation. Yeah. And you just said that it's true when it's wrong. You said that it's right, but it's not. 2 + 2 is 5, but we know we have enough evidence that's not right. That's what happens when we go against our gut.
Yes.
Is that every other equation in our life doesn't line up. The friendships, the friends that I had that were going through real tough life circumstances that needed me while I was in that toxic relationship, while I had that poison in my garden and I was the poison in somebody else's, I was not there for them until this day. Sometimes those conversations come up and I'm apologizing for some real life. I wasn't there for you when you experienced one of the biggest traumas of your life because my equation was off. My compass was off and I didn't follow my gut in the first place. And then nothing made sense. When me and Billy broke up, I had a lot of alcohol in a short amount of time and I ate a whole pizza. I laid on my couch for a couple of days, but that pain in my stomach finally stopped.
Isn't that interesting?
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. I remember so I moved into a domestic violence shelter from my marriage. And I remember looking at these walls and they were stark, there's not anything pretty on the walls. And there were, some kind of ragged bedding on the bed, but it felt so clean. And when I say clean, I mean, yes, physically clean, but I mean, it felt clean.
Yes.
For the first time in 14 years, I did the right thing for me.
Yes.
And so even though I was terrified and sad and mad and all the other things, it was clean.
Yes. And that's something that I will never forget. And if anything now, as I think about relationships that I have, what started our conversation just organically. If you're listening to this, there was no plan. We just got here.
Well, we just sat down.
And we just sat down here, record, and said, let's see what happens, And the things that were on my mind that I want to share with my friend, that if they can benefit or bless or thought provoke anyone else, I'm grateful for it to be able to do so. Is that in the conversations I need to have, whether it be with friends, I can think of a friend I need to have, a difficult conversation with. I can think of a colleague I need to have a difficult conversation with. All of these different things that I need to do, I know that I can do them because I know that I am capable of being in sheer chaos for eons. That there's just a part of me that's afraid of leaning into that dissonance to find peace. And that peace could be an evolution of our relationships or the termination of a contract.
Yes.
And if I do this, if I check myself and I check my intentions, and I make sure that I do this for the benefit, not just of myself, but for everyone involved. That also means I need to be willing to listen, right? And be able to hear constructive criticism. And if one of us isn't ready to do that in a way that allows us to move forward, or if, I'm gonna finish the thought because I had a whole conversation with myself in 2 seconds. This is what I was gonna say. If one of us can't do this in a way that allows us to move forward, then that's just, then things just get terminated. But at the end of the day, that's not my responsibility.
Nope.
That's not my responsibility. The best that I can do is show up, as you said, as my authentic self and say, this is what I have to contribute to your garden.
Yeah.
And this is the fruit that I have right now. Woo! This is the fruit that I have right now to give.
Yeah.
Right. And this is what I can't give. And this is what my garden will not take. Right. And so in this house, I had a friend that one of the friends I'm thinking of with a difficult conversation, and that I said, I know that I've had ample opportunity in reflecting with our wider circle. What we were saying is that's just not how we grew up. There was commentary that was shared on someone's relationship and how they kept their house, and it was like we didn't grow up like that. And so it could be as simple as we have cultural differences in conversation. And when you talk to me, one of the living in the Northwest, people don't say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. And as an educator, having my students call me Coty is wild. When everywhere else I go, they say Professor Morris. And so it's been so interesting to be amongst my colleagues while with kids. When I say, this is how we're going to clean up this space, and we're not going to handle this disrespect, everyone say yes, ma'am. And all these kids hop in and say yes, ma'am. See, we're teaching of a culture.
Yes.
And also recognizing that I am walking into a different vernacular. Some of us don't speak the same vernacular. Not all seeds grow in the same gardens.
Right.
Not everything can be planted everywhere, because we have to understand, in order to be planted somewhere, this compromise is a form of assimilation, that we have to take on things from the soil, right?
Yes.
You have the right to say that's just not for me, but you do not get to poison someone else's garden in the process. Okay,
That was good.
I'm gonna drink some water.
That was good. So I'm realizing that for our listeners, we buried the lead just a little bit. Coty and I are both choir directors.
Oh yeah, surprise.
So we're both choir directors. And tell us about your current role, because it is fabulous.
So I am currently the visiting professor of choir, music education, and social justice at Portland State University. I am also, and this is what I say my primary gig is. My primary gig is I am the founder of Being Human Together, which is a budding community rooted in music education to address different topics like mental health, overall wellness, social emotional learning, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really facilitating conversations like we're having right now. And a passion of mine is working with organizations and schools and communities, kids, and our wiser population, and facilitating conversation. Ever since I was a kid, I always said I wish someone would just pay me to talk. I think if I could just be around people and just talk, then I could help make the world a better place, and
it's true.
Thank you.
I'm
honored. Yeah, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. So that's where I am at this season of my life.
I love this.
Thank
so
you.
it's so cool that you're a professor of choir and social justice.
Yes. Yes.
And it works so well in your organization,
Mhm.
being human together.
Yes.
And, I think that social justice and diversity, equity, inclusion are great buzzwords,
Mhm.
but unless we're willing to actually talk about things,
Yeah.
it doesn't really get any traction.
It doesn't get any traction. And I have a mentor, Dr. David Rail at Michigan State University, who in his genuine concern, he said, Coty, as a young Black educator, I don't want you to become a DEI person.
Mhm.
Let's look at the math. Let's add 2 + 2.
Mhm.
There is no shocker that after the murder of George Floyd, that in the creation of DEI positions in the workplace,
Right.
everyone is questioning if they're actually being equitable, no matter whether their intentions are good or not, right?
Mhm.
Everyone's questioning themselves, they're checking themselves. That there were a lot of hires of people of color, as they should be,
Mhm.
right? And just to give you a little insider trade secret, all people of color are concerned that they are diversity hires. They want to make sure that they are actually being brought into the workplace because they have things of value. But you know why people of color are often put in diversity positions? Because they have to speak on behalf of themselves.
Right. And I just want to say that is not okay.
That is not
It is
okay.
not okay.
Before the civil unrest of our world became mainstreamed, notice the wording of that. It
Mhm.
was always there.
It's always
The
there.
chaos was always there. It just got a smartphone. It just got a camera, right?
Yeah.
And so before it got a camera and an Instagram account, right? What I shared with that professor who wants to make sure I'm highlighted in this world, not just as a Black woman, which is a powerful thing to be, but as an educator, as a conductor, as a singer, as a speaker, right? Wants to make sure that all those identities are also amplified. What I shared with is, well, I've always been a DEI person. It just wasn't out of angst and chaos. It was because I went in my classroom
Right.
and learned the hard lessons that when teaching in the east side of Houston, where my students were predominantly Black and Hispanic, that I needed to work on. What do I do when I have young white children who are homeless, trying to navigate a world when they're being told that they have privilege?
Right.
That too is a lesson that needs to be taught.
Yes.
And yet still teaching those young white women that they do carry a privilege, that is not their fault, that there were things put in place prior to their existence,
Mhm.
right, that are navigating social constructs.
Right.
And something that has helped me is utilizing the phrase, guilt is just the body's way of saying time out.
Ooh.
What we've normalized is guilt means we need to go into an immediate action for an apology. You've done a wrong and you need to fix
Mhm.
it. Guilt, guilt, guilt. Like Game of Thrones, Cersei walking down the street, shame, shame, with the shame bell, right?
Yeah.
That's not what guilt is. That feeling in our gut is actually saying time out, revisit. How did we get here?
Mhm.
And so it's an honor to have a job in a multitude of ways and be put in positions where I can navigate these conversations, not just in the classroom with my future music educators,
Mhm.
but to be able to facilitate and create choirs that build community.
Yes.
A passion project from Portland State and is with my colleague Ethan Sperry was to create something similar to the Dallas Street Choir conducted by Jonathan Pallant. And Jonathan has seen a lot of success with using choir as a way to bring art into communities that would not necessarily be enriched
Yes.
with music or with these things without. I won't call it so much as a conflict as I will call it an opportunity and a perspective, talking about people who find themselves in DEI chairs or that. Here's a perspective that choir did not get me out of homelessness. First and foremost, I will show that I was homeless as a youth, mostly from my early teens, the preteens, through college. And you got to decide, do you pay for tuition, the dorm, or gas for a car? And my car was roomy, and that's what the place that I had to be. So out of my experience of being homeless, we see homelessness on the street or houselessness as only being people living in tents underneath the 405.
Right.
But homelessness takes many shapes and forms, and that's actually evolutionary state of it.
Yes.
There were several moments in which our community members, for they are community members, they are not a other sector of people, right?
Right.
When our community members who live on the street, there were a series of places that they were before. And that could include being on someone's couch, living in a home with 13 plus cousins and an uncle and an aunt because you are from a different country and working on citizen status or taking jobs that other people won't take, and yet they say that you don't belong here and you need to go back to where you're from. That houselessness looks like me sleeping in my car, right? It looks like people going shelter to shelter to shelter. It looks like housing insecurity and inconsistency. What choir did for me was it gave me a community of people who were consistently looking out for me.
Yes.
That's what art does.
That's what art does.
That's what art does. And I know that in myself now. I'm sitting here at 34 years old, and I know that I'm still bad about reaching out for help. Or let me change my phrasing. It's not that I'm bad about it. It's the thing in myself that still needs evolution, that I am still working on. And I can work on those things because I am ready to admit and have the conversations about how I got here and what part of my growth were paused or rerouted because I was surviving a trauma. I was living in active chaos and active stress.
Right.
And so there were things and skills in communication or otherwise that I and other people have not experienced. And so I'm working on challenging, the community on how can we facilitate building community and choir for youth. And so one of the ideas I'm moving forward with this term is starting a youth houseless choir for whether it be high school students, middle school students, or really the Portland State students who are homeless and actively in school and may not be receiving that focus because they're so busy going to the food bank and having a multitude of jobs that perhaps they don't get the time to sit down with someone who has that lived experience or knows how to contact others with their own versions of different forms of development, and needing that. And to go back to the conversation that we've had, how all of this melts together is when we're talking about the relationships and the gardens and the poison that we look at the work hours that come out of education. And me talking to my colleagues, I'm like, it's very easy to say that social justice is me going in the street, in the community and working in shelters. But when I ask you not to reply all, and you do reply all anyway, and you email me through the weekend and want me to work 7-hour days, work 7 days, not 7-hour days, but you work 8 days a week, when and think there's 26 hours in a day, that is an act of social injustice.
It is.
That is a form of abuse. And delayed obedience is disobedience. I've told you exclusively and in detail the way that I would like to communicate with you. But see, that's part of those relationship contracts. Right there. If we can't get that together in ourselves, I just can't go out helping other people with this broom. We got to work on this first. We have to do that. And that's the dance that all of us play, and how we pour light into the community while we're doing continuous maintenance on ourselves.
I have so much to unpack with what you said. And one of the things that I want to really highlight is homelessness and houselessness does not look away.
No.
You cannot identify it. There is no person who is exempt from potentially being houseless or homeless. It doesn't come in any neat little package. It doesn't come in a specific color. It doesn't come from a place. It doesn't come from an educational background. It can happen to anyone. I was homeless at age 35 with a 5-year-old daughter. And I had, a master's degree. I might have got that after. I don't know. It doesn't matter.
No, time is but a construct.
I mean,
Seriously.
The point is, it doesn't look away.
It
doesn't look away.
Yeah.
That's number one. And number two, art has saved humanity over and over and over again since the beginning of time. And that's why you turn on the radio. That's why you seek music. That's why you go to the art museums. That's why you want to write. That's why you read books. Yes.
This past year, to be clear, in the fall of 2020, I had graduated from Michigan State with my master's. I moved back to Houston and I'm teaching at Crosby High School. And I just could not believe we were actually going to teach kids in person. I just could not believe this was happening. in the meantime, in between time, the world's on fire. And I'm in the attic prior to moving back to Houston. I'm in the attic that I could only afford to live in, while I'm in grad school, writing poetry and, playing around with cartoons and like dancing again. And I think a lot of people, one of those eye of the storm kind of moments that happened was everyone tapped into a part of themselves that they had put on the shelf because we stayed busy.
Right.
We have this collective community avoidance language of staying busy.
Right.
And so I got back into, the classroom, and I asked myself, what would happen if I clocked in to Crosby High School on the contract hours, and I was best that I could be on these contract hours. Parentheses, of course I worked outside those hours because sometimes that's just what has to happen.
Right.
But what if me clocking into those other hours were me taking away from my second, and really what then became, and what is always fighting to be my primary job, me? What if I clocked into my passions when I left? And so then now that poetry became this thing that I had the freedom to just do with this abundant amount of time, but that is not a privilege that I have because we're out here, got to get insurance, have to have a job with insurance, right? That what if it went from that to, it is my obligation to set aside time for me to be this creative. And what happens if that passion meets my purpose and how I want to bring light into the world? And so I wrote a poem called When I Grow Up, and it's because I'm at school listening to a piece of legislation, or looking at the news about a piece of legislation where third graders have to decide their career tracks. And I just could not believe we're asking that of little kids. We're asking that of kids. What happened to the part of them that lets them just want to imagine? So I wrote this poem, When I Grow Up, and the first stanza, what do you want to be when you grow up? How do I answer? I want to be the sun so I can shine down on the trees. I want to be the air to kiss the wing of birds. We fail to realize when we cultivate spaces for students, for people, for adults to just imagine, that is where our best work actually stems from, right?
Yes.
We need the freedom to just be creative and be our authentic selves. And some people do that by painting, and some people do that by writing. Some people do that by playing basketball or expressing themselves physically. We all have these aspects of wellness, but then we push people into these corners. We choke the life out of them.
Yeah.
Or we choke that joy out of them. And so it's been really exciting. First, that book's coming out this October. And I'm really pumped about that. And I wrote a canon.
What's the title of the book?
The title of the book will be When I Grow Up, and it'll be a digital release with F-Flat Books. I am grateful to be able to sign with them, and that gives me the opportunity to even extend to other publishers. They're very much catered in amplifying the voice of music educators. And with it being a digital release, there will be lessons and interactive tunes and clickable aspects of the graphics.
So cool.
It's really cool. I'm so excited about it. I got to collaborate with a former student of mine, Monica Juarez. She is a culinary business major.
Ooh.
Yeah, culinary business major who drew a cartoon of me as a going away present when she was 14, when I went to grad school. And I said, one day I'm going to call you with a cool idea. And I don't know what that idea is, but I'm going to call you with it. And so I called her up. She was a senior in high school. And we talked about how to do an invoice and how to do a contract. And there was a different feeling in being able to pay one of my students to utilize their art and it not be about it being her career. It's her scratching that itch the way that I scratch that itch with DJing, because I can, because on this planet, I have the ability to enjoy my life and create at the same time. And a day may come where Monica doesn't want to do that. A day may come where I'm not jazzed up about writing children's books. But what's important is that we are finding ways to express our purpose, right? And that can continue to evolve. So I get to express mine through the writing of children's books and a choral piece that I have right now called Who I Want to Be. That's with Briley Publishing for Treble Voices, SSA, and will come out next year for mixed choir. And got a couple of projects on deck. My Being Human Together website has a fresh launch in this upcoming September, we'll have some free resources for how to have difficult conversations and sharing graphics, whether you are a teacher or just want to spice up your workplace on how to talk about different things, whether it be consent or how to give an apology, when to know when an apology is needed, or also just learning about different artists within a realm of genres. Like, can you name a few Asian composers and or pop stars right now? I can say it's hard for me because that's just not a realm that I dive into. Is that our responsibility to be the gatekeepers of every single one of our cultures? No, it's not. No, it's not. But what if we just had resources to begin that conversations amongst each other, right? How can we go about learning and expanding our knowledge without being low-hanging fruit researchers?
Yes.
We don't want to be low-hanging fruit researchers.
That's the thing right there.
That's what I'm pumped about. I also have resources on my website, which is CotyRavenMorris.com, COTY. If you spell my first name wrong, first I'll cry. I'll forgive you after some reflection. But again, CotyRavenMorris.com, and just grateful to be able to write more and speak more and just connect with people.
And where can we find you on social?
On social media, on Instagram, first and middle name, COTY Raven. Same thing on TikTok, Coty Raven, Facebook, Coty Raven Morris, and then my website, CotyRavenMorris.com.
Oh my God, I love you so much.
I love you so much.
So we are going to go make lunch.
Yeah.
We can sit here and we will continue this conversation for the rest of the day.
Oh, indeed.
But we're going to go ahead and sign off on the podcast right now. And we hope you reach out to us because there's good things coming. And I want to help you with that homeless, houseless youth choir.
Let's go. Let's go.
Let's do it.
I'm pumped.
Okay. Got chill. All right. Bye for now.
Bye.